We are back with part 2 of our exploration of the full story of Basim ibn Ishaq in preparation for the upcoming Ubisoft Forward event, and in this video we're going to touch upon the later part of Basim's life with his obsessive search for Odin's reincarnation, his mission in Constantinople along with Hytham, beware full spoilers ahead about that, his voyage to Antioch in the Silk Road, his meeting with Sigurd and Eivor, the end of his story in the Middle Ages, and finally his ultimate revenge on his blood brother Odin with a new beginning in the modern day. As usual, quite a lot to discuss, so let's not wait any longer and let's dive in the second and final episode of Basim's full story. So we pick up where we left off in part 1 of Basim's story, where he finally started to realize he was the sage or reborn Isu of the Isu Loki. He had an intense but brief struggle with his memories embedded in his DNA and his mind, and eventually accepted them and reveled in them, ultimately deciding to pursue Loki's goals during the Isu era and to enact his long-lasting revenge plan against his blood brother turned rival Odin, or more specifically his reincarnation in the 9th century. But first he had to locate said reincarnation throughout the world, and he had to do that while still performing missions for the Hidden Ones. One of these missions required him to go to Constantinople in 867 AD. By that time, Basim had already become a master assassin and was already tutoring and training his apprentice Hytham in the ways of the Hidden Ones. The two of them were sent to the Golden City by the leaders of the Levantine Hidden Ones to investigate several murders attempts on Leo, the son of the Emperor Basil I, which supposedly had been commissioned by the Emperor himself under the guidance of the Order of the Ancients. Hytham, though, had a second and more secret mission. Mentor Rayhan had tasked him with ascertaining where Basim's allegiance was lying, considering that recently an unspecified event had caused several high-ranking members of the Brotherhood to believe that Basim harbored personal obsessions that would cloud his judgment. The task wasn't uncalled for, as unbeknownst to Hytham, when in Constantinople, Basim made their presence intentionally known, breaking one of the tenets of the creed in order to be attacked and then be saved by the Varangian Guard of the Emperor, which was made up of Vikings led by Tira of the so-called Eagle clan. That was just one of Basim's attempts to look for Odin's reincarnation under the guise of a mission for the Hidden Ones. Thanks to Empress Eudocia, Hytham was able to enter the palace as a disguised member of the Varangian Guard and quickly became the protector of the Emperor's son. So Hytham would have kept an eye on him, while Basim would have followed the mission from the outside, which of course allowed him to act more undisturbed. But while working as a guardian, Hytham slowly became too attached to the boy, to the point of almost becoming a father figure to him, while Basim told his apprentice he was getting worried about how attached he was getting to the boy, raising the tension between the two. In the meantime though, Basim kept orchestrating his personal investigation, asking Tira about the members of her clan and which other clans they had relations with. Several additional murder attempts on Leo happened in the palace, organized by the Emperor and the Order of the Ancients, with Hytham being once again too involved in saving the child, and Basim criticizing him once again, even getting him to admit he'd been spying on him on behalf of the Brotherhood. Humiliated, Hytham pursued some of the escaping assailants and ended right in their trap, eventually being captured by the Order of the Ancients, even though their original plan was to capture Basim. Hytham was tortured by the local leader of the Order of the Ancients, Ishaq, who tried to tempt him into talking about Basim, implying that Basim himself was seeking something specific, as if the Order of the Ancients knew more about him than they showed. Eventually Basim saved Hytham, though Ishaq escaped, which made Hytham realize that Basim did care about him and the mission, not only his personal objectives, which however he still kept pursuing, with Tira now telling Hytham that Basim was looking for a specific Norse person, meaning he was slowly narrowing things down to find his prey. But after saving him, it was time for Basim to reprimand Hytham about disobeying his orders. He criticized his attachment to Leo, stating that he himself knew what it feels to be willing to die for one's children and to commit atrocities that would make the world shake only for them, blurring the lines as to whether he was confirming to be a father himself or whether he was referencing his earlier life as Loki. And when Hytham admitted he cared for the boy like a father, Basim said he was angry also because Hytham behaved as he had hoped his own father would do with him. But Ishaq apparently did not love him and was violent, and he passed that on to him apparently. So here, Basim, Hytham's master, had to stop Hytham and to keep him from pursuing the very thing that he himself wanted, or maybe had wanted during Loki's life. But these weren't the only occasions where elements of Basim's peculiar life had emerged during the mission in Constantinople. Hytham noticed Basim was more experienced than his age would have entailed. He turned cold and dark when he was asked about not having kids. At a certain point, he would be found standing next to a black wolf, and when Hytham told him Leo was hearing voices during his dreams, he said, quote-unquote, "the voice of a jinn," with a haunted look in his eyes, adding that the trick is not to let that voice gain power over you. So yes, clearly Basim was still reeling from the damage left by the internal struggle with his ancestral memories. Eventually, Basim devised a plan to get rid of Ishaq and the Order of the Ancients in Constantinople and to stop the Emperor. The plan involved using Leo as bait at a horse race organized by the Emperor, where he would also participate in. This would draw the Order out, but at the risk of endangering the kid. During the race, the Emperor seemingly intentionally got a turn wrong, causing an incident that went on to create a commotion that gave the Order a chance to strike. So Leo got kidnapped by a woman and two men, and Basim and Hytham pursued them outside the Hippodrome and in the streets. Basim reached the Order members and a whole battle ensued, which was also joined by Ishaq, and eventually Basim's and Hytham's group won, with Basim assassinating Ishaq. After the dust had settled and the mission in Constantinople was completed, and after seeing that Basim's plan to protect Leo for good had worked, Hytham suggested Basim to look for allies for the Hidden Ones within the Vikings. This was actually an olive branch by Hytham towards Basim. He knew his master was secretly looking for a Viking for his own reasons, but he wanted to give back for what he had done to save Leo without getting more into Basim's secrets. Hytham then stated that leaving Leo behind was hard, but it always happened that children outgrew the need for their parents, to which Basim answered, "One hopes they do. Outgrow, outlive, carry on a legacy. It's not always that way," which also caused him to laugh, stating, "We're all living the same story over and over again, Hytham," hinting at how he, as a sage, kept living the same kind of story with the same kind of choices over and over, hoping at the very least to learn from them. By 870, Basim had convinced the high-ranking leaders of the Levantine Hidden Ones that it was time to quote-unquote scour Northern Europe and cleanse it of the Order of the Ancients, once again using the Hidden Ones and their mission as a cover for his true purpose, finding the reincarnation of the Isu Odin. As usual, he was followed by Hytham as his apprentice. At the time, they were both still living in Constantinople, and within the 3 previous years, Basim had become the leader of the Hidden Ones Bureau of the city. During this period, some more trouble was steered by the Order of the Ancients along the Silk Road through a new faction called the Snake Eaters, who were trying to take control of the city of Antioch, and Basim and Hytham traveled there to counter this threat. The Snake Eaters' attack was successful though, with the Hidden Ones of the Antioch Bureau being slaughtered in the process. Thus, Basim sent several letters to a number of Hidden Ones bureaus across the world, asking for reinforcements, and the call was answered by the Hidden Ones in Francia, who sent 2 acolytes called Matthias and Oisel, and by the Alexandrian Bureau, which sent 4 more Hidden Ones. Eventually, the Hidden Ones were able to turn the tables and purge the Snake Eaters away from Antioch, with Basim and Hytham going back to Constantinople while the 6 other Hidden Ones went after the leaders of the Snake Eaters. Some time later, word arrived to Basim that the mission of a Hidden One named Ammon in Bulgar on the Dniester River had failed. Ammon's mission was to recover a Shroud of Eden from the palace of a merchant named Milikov. The mission failed though because Ammon had encountered Sigurd Styrbjornsson, a Jarl from Norway who had bested him in combat and had stolen his hidden blade. When Basim heard of Ammon's failed mission, he was displeased, but that stopped immediately when he was told that Ammon had been killed by a Norseman with a mark on his neck. That changed everything for Basim. The mark on the neck meant he had finally found one of the reincarnations of the Asgardian Isu that had used the seventh method of salvation as the Toba catastrophe was hitting the Earth 76,000 years prior. He had finally found the lead that he had been looking for several years, and so the hunt was on. He definitely had to meet this Norseman. Interestingly enough, they actually met in Constantinople, where Basim and Hytham indeed befriended Sigurd and showed him the city's buried secrets. Basim indeed recognized the mark on his neck, which brought back to him even more memories about his Isu past, and likely caused him to recognize that Sigurd was the reincarnation of the Isu Tyr. Sigurd then invited both of them to Norway to meet his clan, or Basim tricked him into being invited, especially because officially Basim and Hytham were also on Hidden One's duty. They had to kill a local member of the Order of the Ancients called Kjotve the Cruel. They then sailed to Roman Africa and then eventually arrived in Fornburg, Norway in 872 AD. And right as he docked in Norway, Basim met Odin's sage or reborn Isu. That was Eivor Varinsdottir, Sigurd's sister by adoption, but the mark on her neck had been removed by the bite of a wolf when she was younger, so Basim couldn't recognize who she really was, but still he agreed with, or maybe suggested Sigurd to gift Ammon's hidden blade to Eivor. In the subsequent days, Basim and Hytham supported Eivor, Sigurd, and the Raven clan against the Wolf clan and their leader Kjotve, whom Eivor killed in combat, thus solving a problem for the Hidden Ones too. Basim then followed from the sidelines what was unfolding in Norway. King Harald the Fairhair, himself another Asgardian sage, tried to unify the territories under his command, and Sigurd's father Styrbjörn bent the knee, giving his lands to the young king, which prompted Sigurd, again driven by Basim, to refuse to stay in Norway at these conditions and to instead sail to England to find fairer lands to conquer as other Vikings had done before them. On Basim's side, this was once again his customary strategy, furthering his own goals, in this case following Sigurd and steering him in the hopes of fighting Odin's sage under the guise of a mission of the Hidden Ones, in this case ridding England from the Order of the Ancients. So Sigurd, Eivor, and a splinter group of the Raven clan, along with Basim and Hytham, sailed to England and they settled in a village they called Ravensthorpe, and from this time onwards, Basim would have stick to Sigurd, whispering in his ears to further his own objectives at all times. The Vikings started forging alliances with the local kings and leaders in England, and in one of these attempts, Basim followed Sigurd in Oxenfordshire. Basim and Sigurd had decided to side with the local Thane Gidrich against the region's ealdorman Lady Edwin, who was supported by King Alfred of Wessex. In the meantime, Basim had kept promising Sigurd he was destined for something greater than what normal men could aspire to. He kept rousing his ego to manipulate him easier, and this time was no different. They allied with Gidrich because he could lead them to Fulke, a holy woman that dealt with artifacts of otherworldly nature and that was in possession of a monolith called the Saga Stone, which Basim was looking for because of his search mission, and Sigurd instead was looking for because he had been promised it would show his true nature. Eventually, Eivor's and Gidrich's group defeated the Saxons led by Lady Edwin, and then they reached the Saga Stone within her castle, which was then revealed to be covered with Isu language script. Sigurd recognized the words because of his memories as Tyr, but also Eivor felt like she recognized the stone, and Basim took note of both. At this time, Basim was starting to notice something peculiar with Eivor as well, though he wasn't sure yet. But right after that, Alfred of Wessex and his troops reached the castle. In the parley discussion that ensued, Basim was quite literally whispering in Sigurd's ears. They decided to exchange the best warriors of both sides to keep the peace, but shockingly, Fulke betrayed her companions, revealing to be allied to Alfred, and then told him that Sigurd was the actual person worth recovering. In reality, both Fulke and Alfred were members of the Order of the Ancients, with Alfred being their leader, and Fulke being one of their most obsessed members with regards to the matters of the first civilization. At this point, Fulke had recognized that Sigurd might have been a sage, and so she requested to hold him and keep watch over him, which also would have translated to torturing him in order to force him to witness more memories from his original Isu life, in order for her to get more information from him. Without Sigurd with them anymore, Eivor and Basim started collaborating to get him back, of course for widely different reasons. In fact, the Saga Stone was actually a stone that had been placed at the entrance of an Isu vault built by the Asgardian Isu that Loki, Odin, and Tyr had knowledge of, and thus all of them were one way or another drawn to it. Eventually, Basim and Eivor tracked down Fulke and Sigurd to Kent. In their investigations, Basim slowly opened up to Eivor, showing more of his assassin side, discussing the Hidden One's cause, his respect for Hytham, and the Hidden One's objectives. During their investigation, the two of them shared a moment of bonding, where Basim opened up even more to Eivor, telling her more of his story, once again potentially mixing his own story and that of his previous life as Loki. He told her that by that time his parents and brothers were all dead. He had had a son, but he had been taken by someone whom he had trusted, a mentor of his. The reference was supposedly to Odin imprisoning his son Fenrir during the Isu era, taking everything Loki had at the time, something for which Basim, 76,000 years afterwards, was still looking to getting his revenge over. The investigation on Fulke and Sigurd led Basim and Eivor to Canterbury. On their way there, Basim yet again opened up to her, telling her more details about his early life in the Abbasid Caliphate, but there was no time to waste. The two located Fulke's sanctum in Canterbury. They found her writings and the Saga Stone, but no trace of her or Sigurd, apart from a box that contained Sigurd's severed arm. Fulke had done this to make Sigurd feel even more like Tyr, his original Isu, in order to cause an even bigger flow of memories, but of course also a bigger trauma. More investigation on Fulke's new whereabouts led Basim and Eivor to Sussex, in a fortress called Portchester. Eivor decided to rally all her allies from across England to take the fortress and save his brother, along with Basim, and thus the siege of Portchester ensued. Eventually, Basim and Eivor found an injured Sigurd, and while Basim stayed with him, once again, Eivor pursued Fulke until they had their final fight, with the Viking prevailing in the end. After all that torture and pain though, Sigurd was a different person. The flow of visions had been constant, and he was even more sure of his godly destiny. He had supposedly finally realized he was the reincarnation of the Isu Tyr, and had finally recalled the location of the Isu vault, but wasn't able to put all that into words for Eivor. Thus, in order to prove his destiny to her, in 877 AD, he decided they'd travel back to Norway to see it for themselves, and so they did. At this time, Basim had made himself scarce, but not completely. His ideas about Eivor being the reincarnation of his hated blood brother Odin had gained traction, and so he decided to trail her and Sigurd from a distance to let them do the heavy lifting at the vault and to strike just at the right time. So Eivor and Sigurd finally reached the Isu vault from which the Saga Stone had been taken, a vault that contained the Yggdrasil supercomputer, a device that was capable of creating countless and endless simulations while also sustaining the bodies of the people using it pretty much forever. The two of them even used it for a time until Eivor decided they would exit its simulations, and when they did, that's where Basim decided to reveal himself for what he truly was. He captured and held Sigurd hostage, asking Eivor to get closer, almost calling himself foolish for not realizing sooner that she was Odin's reincarnation, that she was his target all along, and she had been in front of him for 6 long years. So the two started fighting, with Eivor still not understanding what was happening and Basim giving her more hints but not outright stating it. He mentioned he wanted her to suffer more than he suffered, that all of this was about his son, another reference to how Odin had imprisoned Fenrir. He even told her to dig within her ancestral memories before jumping on her, and finally realizing he couldn't see that she was Odin's reincarnation because that wolf's bite had removed the mark on the neck that all the Asgardian sages had. After escaping through the various levels of the vault and being chased by Eivor, Basim reached Sigurd once again. They called each other Oathbreaker and Justice Bringer because they both recognized that they were sages, but Eivor reached them again and she prevailed in her final fight with Basim, forcibly hooking him to the Yggdrasil machine and then having the machine powered down to its minimum level, effectively trapping him inside an almost powered off machine in its digital world forever, or better, for a very long time, from 877 until 2012. In 2012, the Yggdrasil machine, along a network of Isu temples and devices across the world, was reactivated following Desmond Miles' sacrifice in the Grand Temple of Turin, New York, in an attempt to create a magnetic field that would have protected the world from the incoming second disaster. This meant that while his now consumed body was still hanging from the machine, Basim's digital persona could move again within the machinery and also within the Grey, the digital environment made up of all the digital networks across the world, where he even met the Reader, a construct that originated from a copy of Desmond Miles' consciousness. It was at this time that Basim had to adjust his plan to still make it work. In fact, from there, in 2012, Basim took control of the Yggdrasil machine and started to overclock it. He caused it to work to its limits, to generate countless calculations, and because this vault was specifically where the protective magnetic field originated, this overclocking caused the Earth's magnetic field to grow stronger every day for years, causing increasing issues across the planet that were bound to turn into a new catastrophe which was going to affect the planet. By 2020, Basim's plan was to somehow attract within the Yggdrasil vault Layla Hassan, the so-called Heir of Memories, who had obtained the Staff of Eden containing Alethia's consciousness by Cassandra of Sparta in the Atlantis vault the year prior. But it had to be gradual. It was Layla and the assassins who had to do the whole work in the outside world. Thus, from the Grey, he sent a cryptic message to them, a message of hope with a promise to help averting the new impending catastrophe that he himself had facilitated if they were able to find Eivor, her origins, and eventually himself. Basim even sent them the coordinates from Eivor's grave in North America that he had gleaned as the most probable results through several calculations he did together with the Reader, and everything went according to his plan. The assassins found Eivor's grave, they explored her genetic memories through Layla, they found out about the Yggdrasil vault and how to enter it, and also that is where the protective magnetic field had originated. So eventually Layla did go to Norway and enter the vault in order to put the magnetic field back onto controlled levels, and she brought the stuff with her to protect herself from the heat and radiations caused by the overclocked state of the machine, which was exactly what Basim wanted. So Layla allowed herself to be clutched by one of the claws of the Yggdrasil machine to log onto it, hoping to keep herself alive while holding the staff, but sadly the staff fell from her hands. At this point, it was almost too easy for Basim. He offered to slow down the machine together with her without telling her that he'd be released at the same time, and when she accepted the offer, he commanded the machine to stop its calculations, bringing it to its standard routine, and thus also bringing the Earth's magnetic field and its shield back to their standard operational level. In the process, Layla would be trapped in the machine because of the lingering radiations contained in the vault, while instead, Basim released his old body to fall quite conveniently on the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, which immediately cured him. At that point, Basim's plan was pretty much complete. He had survived, he had reobtained the staff, meaning he had reunited with Alethia's consciousness, and most of all, Odin and his reincarnation had both died. After 77,000 years, he had come out the victor of their everlasting game of revenge, but of course, even then, it wasn't over. Basim eventually reached the cabin where the assassins had been analyzing Eivor's memories and seemed to be interested yet again in helping them taking the fight to the Templars in the modern day. He asked for a meeting of minds with their leader William Miles before walking to Eivor's grave, whispering to himself and to Eivor's remains that now he would have gleaned all her secrets and all her skills so that he eventually could put his family back together, hinting at himself having a second part to his plan. But that wasn't the last of Basim. He indeed spent time in the Animus, learning of Eivor's story, which also caused a kind of a bleeding effect apparition soon thereafter, and he also did spend some time in the cabin reading about Viking myths and how his betrayal of Baldur was portrayed in them, until one day, within the Animus, he witnessed the final known chapter of Eivor's story. That's where he studied and found out that back in her time, Eivor dealt with her own internal struggle with Odin's memories in a very different way compared to what he did with Loki's ones. In fact, at some point, she tried to learn from them instead of the quote-unquote mutual understanding that Basim had created within himself. He thus proceeded to witness Eivor's final goodbyes with the people she cared about, the most relevant for him being Hytham, whom even at this point, 1,000 years later, Basim remembered so very deeply. While Basim was checking out Eivor's memories though, he was contacted digitally through the Animus by William Miles, the leader of the Assassins. In a way, they finally had the meeting of the minds that Basim had asked for. In their exchange, Basim confirmed he still cherished the Assassin's Creed, that he still believed in the Assassin's cause, and that he even wanted to help the modern day Assassins improve compared to their current stance, of course saying all that in his classic mysterious and perplexing tone. So William took up on his offer, but first he asked for something, a vial of his blood, so that the Assassins could sequence his memories and know more about him and his story. That is how presumably we are going to experience Basim's memories in Assassin's Creed Mirage later this year, but we won't have to wait until then to find out more about the game, as on June the 12th, during their new Ubisoft Forward event, Ubisoft is likely to finally show some official gameplay for Assassin's Creed Mirage and share some more news about the game, but if you can't wait until then and want to get up to date with the currently known info about the game, you can check the video that you can see on screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on our next video.